Hello everyone, and welcome to my channel. This is an educational channel, and we take a look at great theories of everything, ancient and modern, all-encompassing theories, grand unified theories, magnum opuses, and tour de forces that you probably haven't heard of because they are mostly obscure. People who spent their whole life or at least a few decades working on something and put it out there and really in my opinion, hit a home run with it, but they haven't gotten any credit or acknowledgement, much less money for their efforts. And this is I'm doing this for hoping that it might help you the way it helped me in terms of my paradigm shifting, trying to awaken to 5D consciousness, my quest for better mental, spiritual, and physical health, and my formation of a holistic worldview. Today is our 97th video that we've done on Daniel Ingram in his book called Mastering the Core Teachings of the Buddha. And again, this is not so much a book about Buddhism as it is about Buddhist practice, the core teachings of the Buddha. Really the three trainings: morality, concentration meditation on an object, and insight or wisdom. And that is opening your 5 sense doors and your mental impressions to investigation for the 3 characteristics of impermanence, dissatisfactoriness or suffering, and no self. All of our impressions, our sense impressions, mental impressions, have those 3 characteristics. As we recognize that, we cycle around the stages of insight, enlightening ourselves by degrees. Now, we're toward the end of the book here, and he's talking about psychic powers and performing magic with a K. And we're kind of in the middle of a discussion here about all of that. So we'll just start in and see. I'll try to clarify if we're in the middle of something. In general, the more people's fields of experience overlap, and the more obviously they overlap, the more fields of belief and disbelief you have to deal with. In these circumstances, overt magical acts that do not fit with the paradigms of these fields become more difficult. Ways to deal with this include: A, giving up and not attempting magic. I call this dodging the issue or settling for the lowest common denominator. Magic is happening regardless of whether you wish to acknowledge it. And beyond a certain point, pretending magic isn't occurring. Pretending magic isn't occurring option is not really possible and certainly not ethical, given that all our actions are causal. Attempting magic in private, with the thrust of the work being to cause effects that will have minimal, if any, obvious overlap with anyone else's field of experience, with intentional magical setup to help block the bleed-through of those magical effects into the wider world. This paradigm is still extremely naive in that it causes ring out widely. It's in that causes ring out widely in time and space. However, in practice, doing magic in private can be quite effective. I call this private magic. It is clearly the easiest of the lot. While there is no such thing as private magic, as this field of manifestation is interconnected in deep and resonant causal ways, still there are some basic functional reasons to think about magic done in private versus that done in public. However, like all the others, even so-called private magic still involves the most important field of disbelief of them all, yours. Attempting magic that does overlap with others' fields of experience, but does so in ways that all the effects appear to be either ordinary or at least not noticed to be magical. This is C. So attempting magic that does overlap with others' field of experiences, but does so in ways that all effects appear to be either ordinary or at least not noticed to be magical. I call this stealth magic, as it gets in under the radar of the fields of disbelief. Number C, we're still in C, but this is the subset, one example. You are in a conference in a small, poorly ventilated room with a guy waving around a dry erase marker with the cap off. The solvent smell is causing you nausea. After a careful consideration of the ethics involved, you mentally will him, with no external indication, to put the cap back on the marker when he is not writing with it. He puts the cap back on the marker and doesn't notice at all. The act was clearly magical, but didn't run into anyone's field of disbelief. And 2, this example brings up another sub-point of great profundity. It is impossible to distinguish between spell casting and prognostication. It is purely a matter of convention. One could just as easily say that your internal experience of willing him to do something was just a clue concerning what was going to happen anyway. To needlessly anthropomorphize causality, it doesn't seem to care one way or the other. D. Attempting to work with the specific holes in a person's or a select group of people's fields of disbelief, thus working specifically in ways that they truly believe are possible, so that you do not overtly run into the blocks in their field of disbelief, but instead work with what the group feels is possible. I call this public consensual magic, as there was a consensus as to what was possible and what was acceptable. Just as the medical profession highly emphasizes informed consent, so as to respect the patient's beliefs and rights, so we should adopt a similar view regarding magical acts and those involved in them. Obvious examples include such things as faith healing and fortune telling. As those who were there often share what happened with people who have different beliefs, public consensual magic often enters the next category, which is E, called attempting to work in public ways that directly contradict a person or a group's field of disbelief. This can be done, but the backlash tends to be significant and often much more harmful to the practitioner than to those whose paradigms were challenged. I call this public non-consensual magic. Important points about this are: 1, it can be astounding how dense people can be in the face of magical experiences that might challenge their paradigms. The connections people can miss and experience while they seem to forget happened, or they compartmentalize away, can be amazing. While this can be very useful for the magical practitioner, it is not an effect that we want to count on happening in the face of repetition, nor even count on the first time. People often react, this is number 2, people often react negatively in relation to those whose paradigms diverge from their own. This is instinctual, and while these reactions can be clothed in the predominant institutions, laws, and decorum of a specific time and place, nonetheless, they can be extremely detrimental to the magical practitioner. We can look to myth, legend, and history for illumination on this point. Consider a fanciful medieval setting and the reaction that various non-magical people or groups, or those of another competing magical tradition, might have towards the various other magical ones. Note the common elements of denial, fear, anger, bargaining, and manipulation in the following scenarios. The local ruler might size up the old wizard in the lone tower on the hill. He might believe that the wizard was just an old wacko, or if he believed he had some power, would want to know how to keep him on his side and his chances of doing so. Could he be bought, seduced, or coerced through threat or otherwise manipulated? The local townspeople might know of a witch out in the forest. Many would fear her. Some would seek her out for help with love, illness, or obstacles. Others might think she was just an old mad woman. Religious people might think she was in league with Satan and burn her at the stake. Reactions like these take place today all over the world and in civilized countries. The more your basic paradigms and lifestyle diverge from those around you, and the more obvious you are about this, the stronger the reactions you will encounter. Consider those of one religion or political party killing those of another, as we see on the news daily. And this is F, attempting to alter the paradigms and expectations of a person or group before performing public magic, thus changing it into targeted public magic. Skeptics would call this suggestion. I would call it education. Another extremely important point about having magical experiences is that your paradigms will begin to diverge from those around you who haven't yet had magical experiences that they acknowledge it as such. There is no way around this. The more times you see visions, travel out of body, do energy work, trace glowing pentagrams in the air, speak with spirits, shift into altered states of consciousness, manipulate the world in various extraordinary ways, understand aspects of reality, or radiate glowing beams of love out into the world, the more you will be out of alignment with conventional reality. Not that you could get two people to agree about exactly what that is, which itself is very revealing. Real practical wisdom involves working with this to everyone's benefit, or at least not to anyone's detriment, if you can help it. There is a difference between our inner world diverging from the non-magical norm and our appearance diverging from it. This has to do with external marks of being different, such as unusual clothes, tattoos, hairstyles, props such as wands, daggers, pentacles, crosses, amulets, dorhes, bells, incense, etc., special languages and symbols on belongings, etc. Having cool and unusual props can be great fun, as well as help to create situations that are more conducive to certain desired roles, behaviors, and states of mind. They can be useful physical reminders of more seemingly abstract spiritual qualities and principles. For example, I have a medicine Buddha Thanga that I take as inspiration to use magic in healing ways and to develop healing qualities. Props can have the positive impact of giving us a sense of there being something special and symbolic in what we do. Props and trappings may also attract people of like mind, but they can repel those who have prejudices against the particular tradition we are working within, and so are a mixed blessing. Props can also attract undue attention and can adversely affect jobs and relationships. While props have their distinct advantages, particularly as they may work with deeper aspects of your own magical mind to short-circuit part of your own field of disbelief and to focus and firm up various aspects of your vision and intent, there are reasons to get used to working without them initially, since if you are going to do stealth magic, it is much easier if you are free of props and trappings. I myself have some props that I consider skillful, helpful, inspiring, and aesthetically pleasing, but strangely enough, most of the time I do my most important work without them. This is merely a personal quirk of my own. The counterpoint to this is that props can alter other people's fields of disbelief based on their own internal paradigm conflicts, just as they can alter our own. A person who claims not to believe in magical things may still react strongly to something like an evocative tantric image, a statue of the Virgin Mary, or an incense-filled room decorated with curtains and a magic circle with associated symbols drawn on the floor, creating the possibility of doing more consensual magic. Another important factor influencing the interaction of any magical act and people's reactions to it is the timing of the act. There is immediate magic and delayed magic. Immediate magic is that which has an immediately obvious effect. You wish the candle flame to move, and a few seconds later it moves. Immediate magic is more impressive to all involved, including you, and thus much more likely to garner stronger reactions if it falls outside the categories of private magic or stealth magic. B. Delayed magic is often of broader, subtler, and more complicated scope. You wish for some complex work situation to resolve in your favor, and 2 months later it does. This sort of magic can be much more satisfying in some ways, as typically it involves situations that in the grand scheme of our lives are more important than many immediate magical effects, but it lacks the spectacle of well-done immediate magic. Delayed magic is much more often done as a private or stealth magic. But if you advertised it and turned it into public magic, however consensual, negative reactions often would be forthcoming, and you would have to deal with these fields of disbelief. All other factors being equal, delayed magic is usually easier to accomplish than immediate magic. That said, immediate magic will always have delayed consequences. We won't necessarily recognize as a result of the spell we cast, as causality rings on and on and on. The example of the candle flame moving versus the work situation resolving raises another important consideration. There is magic that works within what might appear to be natural causal mechanisms and effects, for example, the work situation resolving, and magic that works by what are, for most clearly extraordinary or unnatural magical methods and effects, such as the candle flame moving. For lack of better terms and defaulting to limited and inaccurate paradigms, I call these naturally enough natural magic and unnatural magic. Natural magic is clearly magical, and yet the way that everything worked out could very reasonably be explained by a so-called rational or scientific person as being within the laws of what they think of as ordinary reality. Unnatural magic is also definitely magical and much more in line with what most people think of as magic, in that something truly extraordinary appeared to happen, such that a so-called rational or scientific person will have to resort to some very complicated mental gymnastics to try to fit the occurrence within the standard physical laws of reality. And those engaging in these mental gymnastics may include you. All other factors being equal, unnatural magic is generally more difficult to do than natural magic. Also influencing the likelihood of success, we have the degree of alignment between your true desire and the specifics of the magical result you ask for, which is to say the degree to which you know what you really want and your willingness to intend for that specific outcome. This simple dynamic is one of the most challenging aspects of good magical work. This breaks down into its two component parts. A, the degree to which you want the spell to work at all. As the force of desire is the driving force behind magic, if you are apathetic about the outcome, the force behind the magical act will likely be small, while if you are passionate regarding the outcome, it is much more likely to result in something happening. B, the degree to which you are specific about exactly what outcome you desire and exactly how that will come about will have an influence on the outcome. If you are more specific about the desired outcome, it is often harder to get what you wish, though certainly not always. The degree to which you should be specific about the details of the outcomes is an extremely complicated topic. While there are definite exceptions depending on circumstances, in general it is advisable to ask for the most non-specific outcome that will still result in the fulfillment of the core aspects of your true desire. For example, it may often be best to ask for the best possible outcome for all concerned rather than asking for a very specific outcome. though this is not always true. In a familiar vein, each one of us has an ability to feel into the specifics of the web of causality that relates to our specific true desires. This has three aspects. A, the degree to which you can imagine the outcome you wish for happening. In other words, its plausibility. The greater the degree of plausibility, the less you will have to deal with your own and everyone else's fields of disbelief. For instance, if you wish to point your finger at the sun and have the sun suddenly vanish forever, this is obviously significantly less plausible than if you wish to have a black sphere appear between you and the sun that only you could see. B, deeper than that is the degree to which you can feel out the possible waves of resonance of broader implications of what you truly desire happening. And C, finally, there are issues of how you feel about those possible waves of resonant, broader implications, as you may be just fine with the central object of desire manifesting, but you may not be comfortable with all the related outcomes. Some good outcomes arise by mechanisms that are distinctly unsavory. The degree of moral conflict you are willing to tolerate reflects the extent to which you accept the so-called good outcomes arising through unsavory mechanisms. Related to this is the degree to which the intentions of independent agents from a relative point of view align with your own. Let's view experiential reality as the sum of the fluxions of the magical influence clouds, of which fields of disbelief are a small subpart, of the conscious agents in the universes. The degree to which your true desire aligns with or is not explicitly countered by that sum of influence clouds will also influence the outcome. In plain terms, if a number of beings have wishes in line with, are neutral towards, or are in conflict with your own wish, this is significant. This I term the degree of synchrony or asynchrony. Of great significance are also underlying abilities of the agent performing the act. Briefly, the degree of concentration skills will have a direct effect on the power behind the act, and this is particularly true for unnatural magic and immediate magic, though it applies to all other types as well. Most magical practitioners greatly underestimate the degree to which very strong concentration skills open doors to experiences and abilities. As mentioned earlier, a hyper-concentrated mind becomes malleable, pliable, bright, and jumps to any magical task with great ease. At a certain point in concentration, phenomena occur by merely inclining to them. As stated earlier, you wish to draw a symbol in the air, there it is, trailing off your finger like syrup. You wish to visualize an image, it appears fully formed, vivid and radiant. You wish to jump out of body, suddenly you are out. You wish to have a deep intuitive insight into some situation, there it is. You wish to see past lives, there they are. Learning to concentrate well opens a universe of ability that those who have never really learned to concentrate might touch on occasionally in fits and starts, but otherwise will never know. For me to get to this level generally takes at least 150 hours of practice in a short time with few distractions, but I can't predict how long it will take you. The confidence of the agent never underestimate the ability of someone who truly believes they can succeed, or the degree to which lack of confidence can scuttle an otherwise very well set up magical act. C, the level of single-mindedness of the agent. Having the sum of our attention, passion, and intent dedicated to our act is much more likely to result in stronger effects than the mind that is distracted or divided. By divided, I mean that it is common to have mixed feelings about our intended outcomes, even if we are not entirely in touch with those internal conflicts. The familiarity of the agent with that specific act will also make it much easier. Repeated practice of an act makes it easier and easier, with some notable exceptions that are too complicated to detail here. There is also the issue of the setup. Taking the time to really set up the magic correctly can make a big difference. The setup is implied in many elements of a magical working, such as having good props or not, filling out the situation, learning what you can about the causal system you are trying to influence, refining the degree of specifics and alignment, and then doing the magical act at the right time, in the right setting, and in the right frame of mind. All these will have an influence on the outcome. It also generally involves rising to the highest and most exalted state, such as the highest jhana one is capable of, leaving that state, and then resolving to have the magic occur with full and unbridled intent. Finally, as the web of causality is so infinitely nuanced, there are innumerable factors that can't possibly be known, except perhaps by the most highly advanced yogis. And these will be generically and only somewhat appropriately called luck or karma, if you prefer. Regardless of what you call it, this could in many ways be considered the most important of the factors, but in this case, luck clearly favors the well-trained and well-prepared, though not always. We now have enough categories to be able to flesh out a large swath of categories of magic and how they relate to the field of disbelief, as well as how people are likely to react to them, and how easy they are to pull off. At one extreme, we have unnatural, immediate, public, non-consensual, apathetic, poorly aligned, poorly felt out, morally conflicted, implausible, hyper-specified, asynchronous, weakly concentrated, low or no confidence, distracted, unfamiliar, poorly set up, ill-timed, disgruntled, unlucky magic in a non-conducive setting that sucks. And at the other extreme, we have natural, delayed, privately passionate, well-aligned, well-felt out, normally morally pure, unconflicted, plausible, non-specific, synchronous, well-timed, concentrated, confident, single-minded, joyous, benevolent, familiar, well-set-up, lucky magic in a conducive setting that rocks. Were we to put these on a spectrum, we would find that the closer we are to the former, the harder the magic is to pull off, and the closer we are to the latter, the easier it is to pull off. There are exceptions, as an extremely passionate feeling or an unusually concentrated mind might be enough to create powerful effects regardless of other factors. That list of closely related conditions also clearly hints at how various factors might influence each other. For instance, morally conflicted magic is also likely unconfident magic, as is unfamiliar magic. Unconfident magic is likely to be distracted magic. Poorly aligned magic is likely to be apathetic magic, which itself is likely to be poorly concentrated magic. This leads to the next point and finally brings things back into a more Buddhist context. Training the mind to have positive mental factors, ethical motivations, and less specific and more universal forms of well-wishing and compassion is an extremely good plan from a magical point of view. For both ordinary magic and extraordinary magic, meaning the sum of the intentions and their effects. Now this section is called the Brahma Viharas. This leads to the obvious question: how do we train the mind to be clear, steady, concentrated, compassionate, loving, joyously appreciative of the goodness and success of others, and equanimous, having equanimity? These are the Brahma Viharas, or divine abidings, qualities that often get overlooked in many magical discussions, but which I assert are the key to optimal magic, meaning the best magic that we could have come up with in that set of circumstances. Optimal is a concept that those familiar with these matters will quickly realize is at once totally preposterous due to the absurdity of its naivete. And if we are willing to hold it a bit loosely and transcend our tight-assed existential, entitled, and postmodern objections, is also a very useful goal to strive for. Those not familiar with the Brahma Viharas, they are A, loving kindness, which is also accurately translated as loving friendliness, the natural well-wishing for oneself and all beings, and the recognition that all beings wish for happiness. B, compassion, the natural wishing that our own and all others' pain, problems, and suffering will cease, and the recognition that all beings wish not to suffer or experience misery. C, joyful appreciation, the natural appreciation of our own and all others' successes, good fortunes, abilities, and joys. It's also translated as sympathetic joy. And equanimity, the feeling of peace that comes from realizing that all beings are the true heirs of their karma and that their well-being depends on their actions, not on our wishes for them. It also entails a lack of attachment or aversion to any classes of beings and any individual beings. Note, there are many types of equanimity mentioned in the various traditions, so be mindful of how the word equanimity is used in various contexts. The idea of these four being optimal implies an agent who can make choices. That there is an agent who can make choices is a good working assumption for all moral work. Even those with deep understandings of natural causality and interdependence can adopt the relative paradigm that there is a moral agent who can make choices. Optimal also implies that there is some perfectly defined criteria for best, though these cannot ultimately be found. Optimal either becomes an article of faith, a meta perspective, or a vision logic mode of real understanding, or more often some fusion of both perspectives. Okay, we're going to stop it right there, and we'll take over tomorrow where we left off. Thanks for tuning in today.